Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good. I'm
Yeah,
grateful you made time, man. Thank you.
I appreciate the offer. This is awesome. This is my first chance to do like a solo interview. Yeah, it's been, I did a couple of things here and there with cameraman with the co-creator Xander Arnott, but this is my first time getting to do one just me. So
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for being so daring.
yeah,
I don't know if you've ever met Chris Condon. Have you met Chris Condon, the new writer of Green
no, I'd
Arrow?
love to because I'm a huge fan of his work.
Yeah, yeah. So he came on about probably 6 weeks ago, and he was like, "I'm new in this space. This is the first interview I've done." I was like, "All right, well, welcome. Let's make it work." Comic books. Like, did you grow up with them and you started collecting when you were a kid? Like, how did you get to come into comics?
Yeah, so I got into comics. I think when you're a young boy out in the suburbs, it's pretty easy to
Like what year are we talking?
I was born in 1990, so I would say the first comic I picked up was probably, well, technically comic strips in the
Uh-huh.
newspaper. My grandpa and I used to read them together, and that was like a bonding thing. For a
Uh,
couple of years, I lived with my grandpa, so every Sunday but even the daily papers, but especially the Sunday papers, we'd read the newest Calvin and Hobbes. We'd read, the Peanuts, Beetle Bailey, all the good stuff. But then, but yeah, I think the first time I saw a comic book was at a grocery store or maybe my local 7-Eleven, and I picked up just a random issue of, gosh, I think it was like a Silver Surfer tie. It was like Silver Surfer meets Spider-Man, but it was, in the 90s. So I'm not entirely sure what meetup that would be. But and then I ended up buying like a Silver Surfer figure because I just thought he was so cool. And I'm not even a huge Marvel guy. Like I love Marvel characters, but it wasn't like that. It didn't really make a lot of sense that I would jump straight into buying a figure. But when you're a kid, you see something and you're just like, yeah, I love this thing. Um, and so yeah, Silver Surfer, a random Punisher, or was it Ghost Rider issue at the grocery store, Sonic the Hedgehog comics I was obsessed with. Anytime I
Sonic.
saw one at my 7-Eleven, I picked it up and I just ate it up. This was like right around the time of Sonic Adventure video game, if you remember.
Oh, I remember waking
A
up
lot of
early in the
hype
morning and
for
racing downstairs so I could beat my sister to the Sega and play Sonic. Yeah.
so good, so good. I tried to replay it recently. Does not hold up as good, but it's still it's all nostalgia. It's so good. I still love it. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what else. But yeah, for me, comic books were just kind of, I watched a lot of the cartoons as a kid, specifically Batman the Animated
My
Series,
man.
Superman the Animated Series. I watched a little bit of Justice League Unlimited. Um, and yeah, I love the cartoons. So that was kind of my introduction to a lot of the actual superhero stuff. Um, a little bit of Spider-Man here and there. I don't really know that I picked up a lot of issues, but I always watched the cartoon too growing up. X-Men, the cartoon scared me for I don't know what reason. So I think it was I don't even know because like the theme song is so cool. I'm glad they
Yes.
brought it back for the '97, and yeah, I don't know. I got really into the cartoons, and I wouldn't really say I was an actual comic book reader though until I was in college. I'm going to give you like the short version of the story, which was I knocked on a buddy's door. I hadn't seen him in a while, and I just wanted to check in on him. And I remember I kind of opened the door, and there was just a puff of smoke coming out because he was a big smoker. And he had a stack of books next to him, and he was like, "Hey, I have to write some emails to some friends. If you just want to like flip through these comics while I'm sending these emails, if just go hang out in my bedroom or go wherever and just go read it." And so I flipped through. It was All Star Superman Volume
Oh,
One,
no.
and it was a euphoric feeling. It was I still get goosebumps when I think about it. Just the art was so beautiful. The writing is just so hopeful and colorful, and yeah, it hit me at the right time at the right place. And I remember thinking to myself, because at this point I want to. I'm a poet. I'm wanting to be a playwright. I'm trying to kind of figure out what I want to do with my life. And I remember flipping through this book, and that was the moment where I was like, if I could make somebody feel the way that this book makes me feel, that would be everything. And so uh, I ended up not really picking up any comics after that. I was just very, I just remember being so impacted by All Star Superman. It wasn't until the next year, Action Comics 900, or was it 700? No, 900 came out. And I picked it up at my local comic shop. And pretty much from there, then on, my first like having a pull list and everything,
Mhm.
that was 52. And yeah, I dove in head first hard into comics. Everything DC, then a little bit of Marvel, then a lot of Marvel, a lot of DC. Then I got into the indie stuff, the Image, the Dark Horse, everything. And yeah, just now I have I buy too many books now.
Well, I'm sure you get some comps too, right?
Not as often as you might think.
Okay.
I've been very fortunate to have a couple of comics out there, but not a lot of stuff that's actually been printed. And so I've just been when it's offered to me, I gladly take it.
Sure.
We're just figuring out right now. Cameraman number one just got funded on Kickstarter a couple months ago,
Congrats.
and me and the co-creator were just talking like 2 weeks ago about printing and how many copies we're going to get. And so we talked about comps and we talked about all that stuff. And so that's my first time really getting to like dive into the world of comps. And I love it. I love knowing that I'm going to have so many books with my name right on the cover. It's just a cool feeling to have.
That's got to be it. I've thought that myself, when you go to a Barnes and Noble or a comic shop and the spine, it's got like Spider-Man or Batman or whatever, and then it's your name, and it's like, wow. It's like one of those things you take a picture of and then, blow it up and hang it up in your office or something.
So, in fact, my first time having a book at a comic shop was I very fortunately got invited to do a backup story for Image Comics Radiant Black. Kyle Higgins invited me. And so I got to do the backup for that. And I remember I went to the comic book shop on the release day, which happened to be like right before my birthday. So there was just a lot of excitement in general. And I remember I went to the comic shop and my girlfriend came with me. And she usually doesn't go to the comic shop with me because, it's just a different world. She loves a lot of stuff. It's just comic books aren't super her thing right now. Um, but she came there and she took a picture of me holding my one page comic, and I posted it on social, and I was just super. Oh yeah, it's unbelievable.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's so awesome. I could only imagine. I really could only imagine that had to be like euphoric.
Yeah.
Euphoric. Good for you. Good for you. Now,
When
as regards Radiant Black, I have not read it, but I did pre-order the book.
Yes.
The
Oh
deluxe. Yeah.
yes. That
So
book.
with the story that you did, how familiar were you with like the previous? Because you wrote what, like number 20? Was it number 22? Was the one you worked on?
So 22. I did.
So yeah, how familiar were you from like 1 to 21?
So at that point, I had read. I want to say like the first three issues or so. I don't remember exactly how many, but I had read a couple issues by then. I was already a big fan of Kyle Higgins. Actually, uh, his Nightwing on New 52 was like my introduction to one of
Yes.
the first.
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah. Yeah.
Jason fan, so I was really hyped to dive into his Nightwing run. And so, I've been a fan of his forever. So I've followed his Mighty Morphin stuff. Didn't really read a lot of it just because I was, yeah, anyways. But then I heard he was going to do a Power Ranger, or sorry, he's going to do his own indie book, Radiant Black. The art looked great, the story seemed great, and so I was so hyped. And so I dove in pretty quickly. I wasn't right at when it launched, but it was a little bit after. Yeah, and then what was your question? I'm sorry.
No, no, that's my question was how familiar
Oh,
were you from like from 1 to 21?
so fortunately, so the whole premise of So unfortunately, I don't know if in the hardcover book one if they have the Marshall School of Business backups, but the whole premise behind it is it's kind of a one page gag comic where one of the protagonists of the series that you're going to meet in the first issue, his name is Marshall. He works behind the counter of a video store, that sells DVDs and VHS tapes of, a relic of a time gone past.
And what a
And
time it was. Yeah.
and the whole bit is it's called Marshall School of Business because he always, despite working behind the counter, he uses this as a playground to kind of brainstorm and shoot out ideas or pitch his next business thing. He's really wanting to be an entrepreneur. And so every one page story, Marshall is pitching some new invention he created to either customers or his coworkers. And kind of one of the little bits of it is that no one's interested because
Ah,
ideas are always bad. They're very logical. They come from a reasonable place, but they're ultimately just a joke. And so it's kind of, yeah, it kind of gives me when I was invited to do the comic and I flipped through as many of the Marshall School of Business, it kind of gave me a little bit of Clerks vibes.
yeah, that's what it sounded like as you were telling me. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was very much like, okay, I can dive into this. I know exactly how I can do this. Um, yeah, and so I had a little bit. I didn't really have to have a ton of familiarity with the actual bit to be able
Okay.
to, but and luckily for you, like if you were to read the one page story, it wouldn't spoil anything for you. They're not continuity heavy. They're not
Okay.
connected to the story.
Okay.
They're just a fun little bit at the end of every couple of issues.
That's very cool, man. That's very cool. Now, just to backtrack for a second, I heard you mention it a few times, 7-Eleven.
Oh my
So,
god.
where did you grow up? Did you grow up in the metro area upstate?
I'm from Michigan.
Like Northeast?
Oh, I'm from Michigan.
You're from Michigan? They have 7-Elevens out in Michigan?
I'm sorry.
They have 7-Elevens out in Michigan?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
I had at least at one point in my life I had about three different 7-Elevens within a bike ride distance away from me. So,
I feel so old because here I am, like I grew up on Long Island, like
okay.
about an hour and a half east of New York City, and 7-Elevens were everywhere. And I only thought it like 7-Eleven was in the metro New York area. So
Nope.
you're like, no, I'm in Michigan too. I'm like, really? I really did not know that. Did not
I
know.
live in Chicago and they're all over Chicago too.
Really? Well, thank you. So now I've been cultured that 7-Eleven is in Michigan and in Chicago too. Thank you. I
Yes.
do appreciate that because I
Ooh,
would
of
have
course.
if you would have like bet me, my whole collection, I would have been like absolutely it's in the New York metro area. So thank you. I appreciate that.
No, it's all good.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
I'm absolutely obsessed. I very quickly as a kid fell in love with Coke Slurpees, and it's one of the things like it. Yeah, I every chance I get to have a Coke Slurpee in my life, I take it, even if it's
Absolutely.
even if it's like negative 70 degrees outside and a blizzard outside. I'm gonna walk to 7-Eleven and drink a Slurpee because it's just a comfort thing for me.
How many, but like when we were kids, like a Slurpee was like, oh my God, I'm getting a Slurpee. Whereas
Oh
like
yeah.
now I don't hear anyone, even mention Slurpees anymore, but there
Oh
was
my
a magic
gosh.
for the time of the Slurpee. So
Yeah, I if I could be sponsored by 7-Eleven, that would be everything for me. If they're ever looking for a comic creator to sponsor, I'll be your guy, 7-Eleven.
be like,
Um,
how about this? How about I created this character and instead of working at a video store, he works at a 7-Eleven. So
I don't hate that idea,
yeah,
and I'm gonna take it. And
yeah,
thank you for the idea.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That'd be awesome, man. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So I saw on your credits on your page. I saw
Mhm.
some of the obviously the cameraman and Radiant Black. And when you sent me the cameraman and I skimmed through it, have you ever met V Ken Marion yet?
No, I follow V on VCan on Twitter, and I think Blue Sky now.
Yeah,
Uh,
super cool guy. But the one character in there reminds me of a Weekend Marion hair, the blonde, like
okay.
the blonde hair, like just all like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had him on a few weeks ago. Really nice guy, really sweet guy. And I told him, I said, "You got like surfer boy hair." And then he was telling me, how much he still loves Blink 182. And I was
Oh,
like, "Yeah, the hair and Blink 182 match."
it goes well. So yeah.
Hmm.
Man, being a kid and listening to Blink 182, that was a thing. I was always that age. Well, I wouldn't even say the age. My parents were very protective over the types of stuff, the entertainment I consumed, like a lot of parents, I think. I couldn't watch South Park as a kid. I couldn't watch The Simpsons as a kid,
Really, not even the
but
Simpsons. Okay.
and I couldn't listen to a lot of, like, if it was explicit language in music. So I was listening to a lot of like Matchbox 20 and Backstreet Boys as a kid, but my friends were listening to Blink 182 and Sum 41 and The Offspring. And I remember there was one friend in particular, his name was Nick. I would go to his place and we would just sit in his bedroom and he would just blast whatever, what's my age again? And we would just talk, video games and music. And yeah, those were the days. That was
Those
cool.
were the days. I can completely relate to you. Yes, I can. I had a friend all through school, from middle school, no, from elementary school to middle school to high school. And his parents built in the basement, they built him an apartment.
Yeah.
So he had this mega sound system. So in the basement, we would just sit there and listen to music and play darts, and it was like it's a core memory that I'll never forget. So I totally relate to those times. And kids nowadays, I don't think they have things like that, or they're even inclined, you know.
No, I mean, I think a lot of kids nowadays they have Fortnite, they have Roblox, they have, the video games themselves are the virtual spaces, which kind of is a transition from when I was when I was in middle school and high school. A lot of my socializing was through I played a lot of Halo on the Xbox,
My man.
specifically when the Xbox 360. I would hang out for, every single night. I would hog the 365K modem for the night, and I would play whatever we could play, or whatever, however long I could play of Halo 2. And I would just sit in the lobbies and I would meet people and make friends and, just get belligerent and scream and, destroy aliens and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, and
And
other jokes like your mother.
yeah, but that's kind of, I think that's just that's kind of, so it makes sense to me that kids are kind of jumping into Roblox and Fortnite, and I'm blanking on some others. But yeah, and that's great, but it's one of those challenges too, because you don't want to kind of shame kids for how to socialize, because everyone has their own ways, and times are what they are. A lot of people are on Twitch, and they're doing streaming channels, and people, they follow the people that they like, and they have their entertainment, and they create their friends through the internet, which is a very different experience than I had when I was growing up. But
Right, right. I've told the story of how back in my day, Amazon wasn't a thing, and like AOL
yeah.
was still some time off. So if you wanted to find a missing comic to your collection or to a storyline, or you wanted to find a trade paperback, like you had to actually physically go to different locations and all around these different towns. It wasn't like you just order it and it gets sent to your house like it is nowadays. And in the same vein, I kind of miss it, but I really don't, like I'm glad it's like I bought the 30th anniversary of Zero Hour, and
Oh,
instead of having to go to the comic shop, I just ordered it on online, and it'll be here I think tomorrow maybe, but
cool.
and like because I always reminisce about the death of Superman, um, back in the like I think it was like 1993, and it was sold out, and that was when I found out as a kid that things sell out. Because I was like, what do you mean it's sell out? Like, it's not like I want to read the death of, nope, sorry, son, it's sold out. Oh, okay. So,
Which is
yeah.
funny now, because I feel like if you go on eBay or go anywhere, you'll find first printing of Superman, Death of Superman, and because all the tons of families were just hoarding on all the copies they could get, thinking like, oh, this is going to get my kids through college.
Yes.
No, not so
Yes.
much.
Yes. 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 My co-pilot who's normally with me, Scott, we listen, and tell me if you listen to this. Rob Liefeld's podcast. It's called Robservations.
I've heard of it because I used to listen to the cartoonist kayfabe a ton,
Yeah, me
and
too. Yep.
I think they mentioned that podcast a couple of times.
Yeah, they actually had Rob on a couple of times on there, but
Yeah, yeah.
Robservations on any podcatcher, like I'm iPhone, it's right in the Apple podcasts and whatnot.
Mhm.
But he's a great historian and like promoter of comics, and he talks about like the things from when he was a kid up to like now. He tells these great stories. He does a wonderful and super funny Todd McFarlane.
Oh, I've definitely heard that.
Yeah, yeah, and I inadvertently I last not this past New York Comic Con, but last year, I went over to Rob's table real fast while he was setting up, and I'm like, "Hey, I just want to let you know I love the show." And he's like, "Oh, thank you." And I'm like, "And your Todd invitation," and he broke out in the doing the Todd McFarlane in front of me, and it was so funny. I was like, "Oh my God, it absolutely made my day." And that was like as we were heading out, we were leaving, so that was a good time. But yeah, anyway, Rob's podcast is excellent, and he talks about things from yesteryear and whatnot. I forgot exactly why I brought that up. There was a purpose, but I forgot. So yeah. But what else? So what other things like what are you reading right now? Do you have a current pull list or
So you hit me at a very good time because I actually just went to the comic shop today.
my
Uh,
man?
I used to be, because like I mentioned to you before, I was when New 52 came out, I picked up every single book I could. I think my pull list at that point was like 15 issues.
That's
So I
awesome.
followed like half, well, not half. I followed a good chunk of the New 52 books.
Did you
Um,
read sorry to interrupt, but
oh,
New
you're good.
52 is like that is where my heart is. That was like I often make the quibble on our channel, and I've told Dan DiDio this because he's come on, and I said I just want to let you know that New 52 Justice League is unassailable, unassailable for
Yeah.
all space and time. Like I love that so much. I love New 52. So you
Well,
were collecting like
it had
almost
a
every
lot of
issue?
charm.
Hmm?
Yeah, yeah. So that was that. Like I said, like that was my first run of Nightwing that I read. Was Kyle's run. You know, I was already so excited for Grant Morrison to be writing the Action Comics run with Rags Morales. That was really fun. There were some really good little like even one shot issues that they did with Travel Foreman. I want to
Mhm.
say is his name. Uh, I think it was like a Halloween issue with Crypto the Super Dog in the Phantom Zone. Oh, just like tug on my heartstrings. I love it. Um, yeah, just like there was some really fun, cool stuff happening, and you could tell that there was a ton of energy and excitement, which is why I'm really fascinated by this absolute universe that DC is doing right now, because or even the entire All In initiative, because it's like they're really kind of figuring out like, okay, here's the lessons we learned from the New 52, and here's what we can do to kind of like ramp it up, make everything matter in a way that is going to really excite the fans. And from what I can tell, people are super excited about it, and I'm very excited for them.
Yeah, I'm excited for it, but my excitement is dulled because New 52, like I said, awesome.
Sure.
Rebirth was like, oh my God, we've gone from New 52 to Rebirth. This is the best point in comics history. And then, they have these big ideas, and I'm sure as a writer you could relate. You have this big idea,
Oh yeah.
you're like, yeah, we're gonna drop DC just like they did with Rebirth. There were like Titans and like a couple of other books like Suicide Squad versus the Justice League where they like mentioned Manhattan, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
still like, you know, not any like there it's just whispered through the books.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is that payoff, but the payoff, because that what was it, Doomsday Clock, which I absolutely love,
Mm-hmm.
was pushed back like 2 years, so that whole thing got muddied up. So I'm just hoping now that with the plan they have with Darkseid, they can actually take the time to tell the story. and branch it out, as opposed to being like, oh crap, sales are down. We need this big event right now because we need to, keep our paychecks. So
I mean, I do feel like if you're going to do this kind of like, well, you can't even call it like a hard reset or reboot. It's just like a new
refresh.
universe. If you're gonna do that, I feel like they did a really good job of launching it.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like I read the All In issue, and it didn't feel like it was just like, oh, we're just gonna just suddenly throw the kitchen sink out. Like it felt like there was a real concerted effort to be like keep things within continuity, keep things tied through. Like they reference bits of uh, Dark Knight's Metal. They mentioned a couple of other recent, I think some Justice League stories from recent, and so they kept everything within continuity, which matters to the fans. And then they kind of just found a fun direction. I'm a big Dark Side Jack Kirby New Gods person, so I was reading that kind of more that issue. I love both sides of the story. Like the creative teams were amazing. Wes Craig doing a Dark Side story, I would kill for more of that, please. I hope they keep hiring Wes for more books because that art was amazing in there. But the New Gods book by Rem and
I'm excited for that. And
Evan
Evan Nagel.
Kagel. Yeah.
Kagel.
Oh,
Yeah.
Kagel. Yeah. I cannot wait for it. It's going to be so good. In fact, as of today, Rem shared on his Twitter some some more teases for the New Gods book. It looks so good. I knew it was
Yes.
going to be good. I was excited. I already loved the both of them. Dawn Runners was super fun. I only read the first issue because I'm like, oh, I'm going to trade. I'm going to trade weight for the rest of this because this is just too good. Also, I don't have a lot of space for singles. If I were to show you my office room that we're in right now, you would see like a mountain of long boxes because I've had these boxes since I've started collecting comics, and I'm running out of space. I only
I
have so
can
much space.
I can
I'm afraid.
relate. Yeah.
Yeah,
I can
I'm
relate.
afraid.
I'm a trade waiter now for that specific reason.
Yeah,
Because I really don't have the space for all those. So
and you wouldn't think it would take up so much space because you go to the comic shop and you're like, oh, it's a book that's this thick, but then you go to then even like when I was picking up 15 books a week practically, I would come home from the comic shop and I had my bag and it would be that thick of just all these single issues, and I was like, oh, this is taking up a lot of space.
yeah.
So yeah, now I'm looking into like, okay, what books am I okay with selling and what books do I have to keep? And that's going to be a kill your darlings probably deal that I'm going to be very sad about, but
Yes.
it'll be fun.
Yes. Yes. As someone who sold their collection many years ago, because I was like, I don't have the space, I need to just do trades. I was like, I'm just gonna buy the trades of these stories anyway, so just whatever I can get for them. Like I wasn't overly picky, but it was like, man, because certain ones, certain comics, there's just like a smell brings you back.
Oh,
It's like,
the
oh, I
paper smell
remember.
specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And like I remember certain books, like being in the comic shop and smelling, that paper smell and being so excited after dropping $1.25 on the counter to go home. And, maybe it was a Friday night on a long weekend, and it was like that comic was my best friend for the whole weekend. So
Yeah. It's wild to me to think like, I've one of the things I've been doing lately, I've to kind of not change the subject, but I've been working on. I got invited to do a anthology that's focused on like golden age superheroes
okay.
and all public domain stuff. And so I've been like doing a lot of research and looking into all these books and seeing like a lot of these books are like a nickel and a dime. And just to think like obviously inflation, it meant that book was probably about the same price as a comic today
Sure,
back then for
sure.
15 cents, but just to think about like how different the prices have been over time. And then like if you remember DC having like the drawing the line at 2.99, or was it 1.99? I don't remember which.
I remember with Rebirth, it was like I think they said they were like it wouldn't go over 3.99, I think, when they had the
Yeah.
whole Rebirth like press conference.
I remember that. And I think but then they had like I think it was like specific issues were going to be $3.99. It was like
Yes.
Justice League and Batman. Like the books that are going to make them money, they're going to find a way to milk that cash cow as much as they can. Um, but yeah, that was, I remember all of that. I remember where they announced. I was in an Arby's when they announced the Rebirth initiative. I remember because I worked in an Arby's at this point, and I was taking a break from work, and I was just scrolling on my phone in the dining space, and I saw the announcement, and I just saw like all the. I think it was San Diego Comic Con that year, and Jeff Johns was kind of like breaking down like, oh, here's we're going to do this book and this book and this book, and I just remember like losing my mind because a lot of these characters we were dying to see in the New 52 that just like Donna
Donna Troy.
Donna Troy, thank you. Donna Troy and like Wally West was kind of in like the weird limbo. Like I think he had shown up in little bits and pieces, but we hadn't gotten like, classic Wally West. And so like there were so many like big announcements and like we're bringing all these characters and all the old continuity. A lot of it's going to come back, but it's going to be refreshed. And there was a ton of excitement with Rebirth.
I remember it.
Promise.
I'll tell you what, probably about a year ago, I was tickled to just watch it again. And I watched the whole thing and I'm like, man, I missed that. I missed that time. Because that actually got me back to the comic store to like actually pick up a few of the number ones.
Mm.
And not for saving them to sell them later, but just I wanted to read them because I was excited. And then I brought, I don't know, like I probably had like 8 to 10 of them, and I brought them with me to New York Comic Con, and I just had the artists and the writers sign them, like no CGC, but just for my own personal enjoyment. And they were just everything to me. And like I said, they got me back into a comic store for the first time since like probably Identity Crisis back in like '04 or something. So it'd been quite a long time, quite a long time. But
Yeah.
you mentioned, well, I mentioned and you related it. Like
Yes.
I do this with every guest that I remember to do it. Do you smell the pages? Like when you get a new comic or a new book, you crack it open and just smell and start reading? Like, how does that affect you?
My relationship with that is not the same. Like when I first used to go to the comic book store, I had when I was in college and I was every week. I also had a friend that I made through the comic book shop that I kept coming also just to like hang out with him. And so I just remember like the smell, like when you walk into the store and just like you just get like that rush of the wonderful, all the fresh ink that just from all those pages. And just like that smell, I remember very fondly. And
Yes,
I think about
yes.
it often. I've kind of changed over time. I'm still a trade waiter in a lot of ways, but I'm doing a lot more digital reading now too, which
Do
kind
you
of
do
changes
you
that.
do you have a preference now? Because
It
like,
depends. It
okay,
depends. So I really like manga. I've gotten into manga since over the last couple of years, and I do have some printed manga as well. But I really like reading it digitally, and I think it's because it's easier to because typically the letters are larger. The pages aren't usually as like dense with detail and information. So I think it's a little bit easier for me to read digitally. Um, but yeah, I feel like too, a lot of whenever I back a lot of Kickstarter books, typically, I don't have a ton of money to spend, but I like to support, my buddies, and I like to support creators that I really am excited about their work. And, I'll usually buy the digital copy and I'll flip through it. And, even if it's just a simple PDF, it's, a lot of people are being more aware when they're designing a page, how to make it read better for digital, which is great because I really enjoy reading digital. But yeah, I think I answered your question.
no. So me personally, I've become a trade waiting has turned me into a hardcover snob. And
Oh,
so since I've learned about the Hoopla app, whenever I
yeah,
see something that's trade paperback, I'll just read it on Hoopla. But if it came out in hardcover, I would buy it
sure.
because I also like to like late at night. I have my little light that I clamp on the top of the hardcover. I turn the light
Yeah.
on. I got my little magnifying glass, and it's just
Oh,
me in the dark
nice.
reading my book. But with a trade paperback, the book, it's so flimsy.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
a pain in the butt. So I've adopted that. Have you used Hoopla yourself?
Yes. I didn't get it. So people kept telling me about it when I lived in Michigan. They were like, "Oh, you got to download the Hoopla app. You can get a lot more comics, and you don't have to pay. It's just through your library." But, and I think I had a library card with when I lived in my college town. But when I moved to Chicago, Chicago has a massive library system, and it took me. I think it wasn't until like right at the beginning of COVID lockdown that I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna definitely get a library card and I'm gonna take advantage of this." And so I downloaded the Hoopla app like the day of getting my library card. And yeah, it's because it's not even just comics. They got movies and TV and all kinds of good stuff there. And it's something I keep forgetting that I have. It's on my phone, and I'm constantly like, oh, I really need to go back through and check it because otherwise I'm reading, Comixology or the Shonen Jump app or Viz
Okay.
or Global Comics is the new one that I've been reading a lot of, and so trying to jump back into Hoopla, yeah, I love it.
Well, I'm glad you know about it because it's like I feel like it's still something that's not known by a lot of folks. Like hoopla. Like what is hoopla? But for instance, with trade paperbacks, I like to put them in my Amazon cart and save them for later. But that's the reminder to me that those are the books that I want to look at on Hoopla.
That's
So
exactly what I do for
uh,
just in general anything. Is if there's something I really want, I'm like, I think it's probably going to be on Amazon. I'll go on the Amazon app. I'll add it to my wish list. So I won't even put it to the cart. I'll just send it to my wish list, and then I can reference it when I'm like, oh, what was that thing I said I really wanted to pick up at the comic shop? And then I'll open up the Amazon app. I'll be like, oh, I wanted to pick up this book. Like um,
Thank
this one
you.
I picked up today. We Called Them Giants by
hey,
Kieran Gillen and Stephanie Hans, both awesome folks, and Clayton Cowles. And this is a hardcover, so I know you are a big hardcover.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So um, yeah, I'm. It's actually the first hardcover book I've bought in a while, but it was the only one they had at the shop, so I was glad to take it because I've been really wanting to read it. I love one-shot stories,
Yeah.
and this one is like Kieran Gillen. I really like his writing. I really liked what the two of them, him and Stephanie, did with Die. If you read that book
Have
from
not.
Image,
No.
really fun. Kind of a if people were playing if a group of teenagers were playing Dungeons and Dragons, they got warped into the game, and then it was like a time skip. So it's kind of like combining Dungeons and Dragons with like Chronicles of Narnia,
Okay.
where they come back from this fantasy game that they were playing, and they're all deeply traumatized, scarred. They've been through some stuff, but then for some reason, they are kind of encouraged to come back to the game, to back to this world that they left and they had been gone for many years at this point. And so it was a really good story. I read the first volume. I wanted
That's a great hook. That sounds like something I would be into for sure. For sure.
I
Because I
I'm
did
not even a big Dungeons and Dragons guy,
me
but
neither.
just when you got a charismatic writer who knows how to sell a book and the story and the characters seem fascinating and the art looks good, it's going to be hard to turn me away from that.
Sure. Well, as you were talking about that, have you seen Ready Player One?
I have. I never read the book,
Me
although
neither.
I've had friends. I think I've had friends that read the book. Um, I think I had a friend that was in like a podcast episode that was like breaking down, it was like every page of Ready Player One. I don't remember what it was, but anyways, I did watch the movie. I think when it came to, I had uh, my sister's boyfriend on one road trip back to Michigan. He was like, he always wants to play a movie in the car while we're driving because it's like a 7 hour drive.
Sure.
And he was like, have you seen Ready Player One? I was like, no, I haven't really seen it. I don't know if I really want to see it. And he's like, well, we're watching it. And we watched it. And, Steven Spielberg did a really good job with that
Yeah,
movie.
yeah. That reminded me of like one of those cool 80s movies. There's just
Oh,
that
yeah.
there's just a certain, and I can't describe it, but there's a certain feel to the movie. And it was nostalgic, but it was also super cool. I saw it one time and I just sat down. I'm like, yeah, just nothing else on. I think I might have been homesick from work
Yeah.
and it was a long day. And I'm like, yeah, I'll just watch it. And then I was like, wow, this is really cool. I really enjoyed it. So, but the story you had mentioned reminded me of that also. But the one with that resembled the Dungeons and Dragons and Chronicles of
Yeah.
Narnia.
Die,
What was the name of it again?
die, DIE, like a
DIE?
20-sided, yeah, like a 20-sided die. I have, where did I put, oh, my are up here. Like this kind of die.
Ah,
I got the blur effect on the camera, but yeah. So
I
like,
see.
dice. Yeah, no, that was a good book, and I got to have a copy of it signed by Stephanie because Stephanie was at C2E2. Oh gosh, was this 2021? And I was just like, I love the book. I'd love to. And I picked up the volume trade directly from Stephanie, and that was awesome.
Awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that and putting that on my radar. I do appreciate that. I will remember that.
Happy to do so.
So two more things I want to squeeze in is what are your top three DC and Marvel stories?
Oh,
Just right off the top of your head. You can do either one first, DC or Marvel.
yeah, I'm gonna do DC, and I'm gonna say my number one, and no other comic comes close, is All Star Superman. Just, in my opinion, a perfect comic. Everything that I want to see in comics, everything that I think comics are and can be, just, yeah, it's just a perfect comic in my opinion. Number two, this is where it gets tough. I'm gonna probably have to say Jack Kirby's Fourth World books.
Okay.
Specifically, I really love New Gods because I'm obsessed with mythology, and Kirby's obsession with Shakespeare um, the the gods, Norse gods, which is, yeah. Oh, the that story. I remember picking up the trades and the omnibuy for each of the Jack. It was like 4 volumes of it, and it does the entire does a chronological order, not of the continuity, not necessarily of like what the order that the books came out in. So you'll have Mr. Miracle snuck between Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen and a New Gods, and yeah, just amazing comics, just big, bold, fantastic. Again, why I'm really excited about the new series that's coming out. So that's my number two. My number three, I'm gonna say, I the one that came to mind is Black Mirror, the Batman Black Mirror. By Scott Snyder and Jock, and I think Francisco Francavilla
Mhm.
did a couple issues in that. Just a really fun book. I'm also a massive Dick Grayson fan. If
Okay.
I had it my way, I would just make Dick Grayson Batman. I like Bruce Wayne, but he's had 50 decades of stories.
Sure. Have
And
Have you read Prodigal?
Prodigal, that sounds so
It
familiar.
came out after Nightfall, where Bruce goes
Oh,
away.
no, so a lot of like the 90s 2000s Batman. I'm eventually going to start like doing a lot of backfill reading, and I'm definitely going to jump into that because
Yeah. I remember collecting that issue by issue, and it was like, oh my God, this is so cool.
yeah.
It was the first time, at least, that I can remember in my collecting where Bruce gave Dick Grayson the cowl. And
Mm,
so it's like Dick Grayson and Tim Drake, and they were confronting Two-Face, and it was basically like a flashback almost from time to time of the trauma that Dick endured from Two-Face, and
mm.
then now he's facing him as Batman, and that was like the psychological crux of the story. But I remember that I have a copy of the trade paperback, and it's also part of the I think volume three of the Nightfall Omni. So check that out.
And
What
then
about
my
Marvel?
Yeah, well, my number four honorable mention, it
Okay.
might be Infinite Crisis or Final
Oh,
Crisis. I don't know. I really love both of them for very different reasons.
okay. All right. All right. All right. Let
I
me
had a
just.
feeling that was gonna catch your attention, so I'm
Yes,
happy.
absolutely. So I read Identity Crisis, which is my all-time favorite comic story. I just love that story. And so I've started reading I'm almost halfway through the Infinite Crisis omnibus.
Oh
So I
yeah.
just finished the Rand Thanagar War, and now it's picking up. The next series is the Justice League picking up from Identity Crisis, the
Okay.
fallout of that. And so I want to pick up like each morsel of that story because I only read the book. I didn't read like the tie-ins to like give it the body and the whole understanding, which is like right up
Yeah.
my alley. And then you said Final Crisis like that, but most people, and I have not read Final Crisis, like I had to be coaxed into it because it just seems so intimidating. Like Grant Morrison went crazy.
The Final Crisis was a book when the first time I read it, I would say even more so one of the tie-ins, Superman Beyond 3D.
Mhm.
I remember I read that book and I was like, what kind of drugs do you have to be on to write something like this?
Seriously.
I could not fathom like I knew that there was English words in front of me. I knew that there were images that I could parse, but just like there was such a huge disconnect for me of like what's happening on the page and what characters are saying, and like I was just it was so overwhelming, and there were so many just big bombastic things happening. But then I remember I reread it because I also just couldn't get into Final Crisis the first time I read it. But then I remember I was I think I was just bored one night and I was just like, you know what? I want to give it more of a chance. I want to just kind of see, maybe I didn't give it a fair shake. And I picked it up again and I both Final Crisis and Superman Beyond 3D, I fell head over heels. I was like,
Wow.
it's a much darker story than an Infinite Crisis, but it just hits in that like really, like I said earlier, big and bombastic, but it's kind of intentionally
Sure.
overwhelming because it's supposed to be, because it's a crisis. And um and just like there was a lot of big ideas that happened and some just absolutely reality bending things that Grant is just so great at writing. And yeah, it was a lot more fun to read it this last time.
All right.
um
Now you got my juices going for that
yeah.
because I'm
uh
looking forward to it.
the and speaking of like the omnibuses for an event, I really want to pick up the DC 1 million omnibus.
Hmm.
I've seen it at every time I go to C2E2 is my home comic shop or home comic convention, and I'll go to different booths and I'll see like the giant omnibus, and it's always like $60 to $100. And I'm always just like, do I want to do it? And I don't, only because I don't want to have to carry it in my book bag all day because that's a heavy tome. But just
Yes.
another really fun, lots of tie-ins. Another one actually, and I actually have a book on hand because I'm doing some research for Cameraman #2, and it's the Amalgam Comics. They're
Oh, yeah,
doing
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
omnibus for that,
Yeah.
and I'm a huge fan of Spider Boy. This book was so much fun, and so I picked up a single because I could never find it at my comic shops, so I found it on Amazon, and this was a couple years ago, and I finally got around to reading it, and I absolutely love it. It's just vibes 100% the whole way through.
That's awesome. You just said amalgam too, so we're like simpatico because
Good.
I was there, man, when that was happening. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe Marvel and
Were you
DC are
reading all the
doing
Dark
this.
Claw?
Yeah, yeah, Dark Claw too. Yep, and like, who are they
Oh,
going to team up next?
was it not Clark Kent? It was Steve, the Super Soldier book. That
Mhm.
was Superman meets um, Captain America. Yeah, love that. So on the Marvel side, that's a really good question.
Because I'm not a big Marvel guy. Like, I'm still trying to like get myself psyched up for that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Like it's a world that I love. I'd say my introduction to Marvel was Superman Big Time by Dan Slott and Humberto Ramos. And that was just like I was already really into Spider. Like I always had like a deep fascination. I think a personal connection because hey, it's a white kid from the Midwest that, well, technically he's East Coast, but um, that just kind of down on his luck, constantly just dealing with it, feeling a lot of anxiety. Literally,
Sure.
one of his superpowers is anxiety. I was like, oh, I can relate to this. Um, and so I was really excited to finally dive in, and it was right around the time of Spider Island coming out. And so I read all of Spider Island, and I had so much fun with it. And I've been wanting to reread it because I have a feeling I would have a lot of fun with it with a reread. But I actually just reread Spider or Big Time, doing some more research for Cameraman, and yeah, that's a really good book. It's
Have you read,
a
have
status
you,
quo setter, and I'm sorry.
no, 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 speaking of Spider-Man, did you read the Brand New Day when that went down?
So yeah, so after I read Spider Island and Big Time, and I went through all like I tried to fill in all, and I was also reading currently with anything Dan Slott's Spider-Man related, and then I went back to uh, oh, then I went back to like his stuff before Big Time, and like that was a lot of just like the Brand New Day stuff before it was kind of like officially handed over to just him, and with all the different writers. And yeah, that was, I was told it wasn't good going into it. I had a friend who was also a big Spider-Man reader. He was like, "Oh, I don't like Brand New Day," because he was more upset
Sure,
about the fact that Mary
sure,
Jane
sure,
had broke up,
sure.
which I get it. I like them together. Um, but they yeah, that was a book that I did read, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought, because I really like the idea of seeing Peter Parker. Like, if Peter's going to be single, I want to see him single. I want to see him dating. I want to see him, kind of figuring out what to do with his spare time. And I feel like, obviously, besides just being Spider-Man, and I just felt like it kind of fleshed out his character a little bit more, gave him some more stuff to do, because he wasn't having to focus so much on, at least story wise, it didn't have to focus so much on his marriage. It's like, hey, let's see him go on some dates. I remember there was like a Valentine's Day special where it was like Peter going on three different dates, and it was like three short stories, and yeah, that was fun. I remember that issue. I have fond memories of Brand New Day, Big Time, and Spider Island. Um,
Okay.
what was my next big
Something X-Men related
Hawkeye?
or Hawkeye? Okay.
Hawkeye specific, the Fraction. I love the Fraction Aha books, but the specifically the Annie Wu, uh, when Annie Wu did the art for the Kate Bishop
Yes.
series in Hawkeye, those are like some of my all-time favorite books. I just like, I have the trade of Hawkeye. As much as I love the whole run, those issues specifically, just like they just have such a fun vibe to them that at that point I wasn't seeing a lot of in comics. This like kind of not detective, kind of detective, but also just like very funny action, story. I think yeah, just really fun, and I really like Kate Bishop as a character. So that book really hit me in a good way. But what I see is like my other big Marvel book, and I feel awful because I have like a whole section on my shelf for just Marvel books, and now I'm being asked this, and I'm blanking. Um, I
Something.
did really enjoy the beginning of All New X-Men when
Okay.
that started. That was also a very just fun. You could tell like there was Bendis was working on some really, he was really excited, and he had a lot of really big ideas for the book. And that was a lot of fun. I was also kind of my introduction to X-Men besides the cartoon. So that I think that hits me. Oh no, I'm sorry. My new number one Marvel is is going to be Elektra Lives Again, written by
Really?
Frank Miller. Yes,
Wow.
I'm
You're
that book in
going in the
particular
way
was
back.
absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I haven't even read that much Daredevil. I've read a little bit. Like I read the awesome uh, Mark Waid Chris Samnee run, and I've been wanting to read a lot more Daredevil, but I don't even remember how I got introduced to it. It actually could have been cartoonist kayfabe that we mentioned earlier. And I watched, or I watched an episode where they kind of broke down this book, and it was just so beautiful. The art is just stunning. To me, it's Frank Miller at his best for art. And it was before he did some books that I'm not as much of a fan of. and just a beautiful book. And with Lynn on colors was just oh, just a beautiful book. I have the hardcover of that because there was like I picked it up from a I picked it up on from a digital. It was like a online marketplace for old trades, but it was like the Canadian print was a hardcover for some reason of Electra Lives Again. And that book was, oh, it's just a beautiful book. It's one of my prized books because I spent a pretty penny on it too. I also love Electra Assassin. That that book, just Sienkiewicz art is just always gonna
Mhm.
win me over. But then just like,
What about
you know,
Hick Vengers?
I'm sorry.
What about Hick Vengers?
I've actually never I have one issue of an Avengers book, and it was someone a friend of mine gifted me Avengers #1. I want to say it was like Heroes Reborn era. So it was like with that gold cover, and it was like the sunset or dawn. I think it was
Mhm.
dawn because it was trying to embody like a new day for the Avengers. Um, I picked. I think that's the only time I've read an Avengers comic, but I've heard amazing things about Hickman's Avengers run.
Well,
Like I
I'll
really
tell
want
you,
to read the Hickman Fantastic Four. I really want to read that at some point.
me too. I have those his volume one and volume one and two of his Avengers omnibuses. I actually read the first one, and I had never ever read an Avengers comic or anything. I've only
Yeah,
watched, like the Spider-Man cartoon and the Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and then, like the
oh
movies, like the
yeah,
MCU movies, right?
yeah.
And so when I picked that up, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm like, who is this John Hickman? And now it's like anything with Hickman, I'm at least curious about, and like I'll trade weight on him just to see what's going on. So, yeah, Hick Benders, thank you for sharing those. I appreciate it because I
Yeah.
often ask like fellow YouTubers, I'll be like, hey, you're big into Marvel. Does Marvel have like a year one? Like if someone says, what should I read for DC? You're like, all right, you got to read year one with Batman. That's a must. Do they have those type of stories? And it's often kind of been like, well, so you
And
just put
that's
some on my radar. Thank you.
yeah, I don't know if it was like so much Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns, but there was just DC has kind of always had a deeper interest in kind of doing like these one shot graphic novels, that just kind of do their own thing. And Marvel's taken some time because they've been so focused more on just like the events and the single issues. And you'd see them dabble in it a little bit. Like Chip Zdarsky did that. I haven't read it yet. I want to really bad. But the Spider-Man, blanking on the name of it, but it's where it's like Spider-Man by the decades, and so
Mhm.
every issue is a different decade and kind of summarizes all of the Spider-Man stories, but like
Mhm.
in a way that makes sense for continuity. And that's really fun. I think that's a really cool concept, and that there's got some really good stories like those. But yeah, there's not really like there's great runs of Marvel books, but there's not a lot of good like you don't need any like context to be able to read this, and you can just read it in a 2 to 3 hours and have a great time with it.
Yeah, and
So
then eventually trying to assimilate what you've read. Because I bought what's his name? The Astonishing X-Men Omni. And I
oh yeah,
read a couple of the issues and I'm like, wow, this is really good. But I mean, I've always been like scared of the X-Men, the comics, because, growing up, there was like seven or eight of them. And it's like, how do you know what's going on? And then this is retconned and that's retconned. Everything's retconned.
yeah, that was kind of what I found funny too with like the Hickman era, the Hoxpox, if you will, was like it started out 2 books, which is just like so ambitious. That's so like, oh really, we are really going there. We're doing 2 books for all of X-Men. And then it splintered out, and then it splintered out, and it splintered out. And so like if you have an X-Men that you like, you can know exactly how to follow them. But if you're just like a general X-Men reader, hopefully, you're enjoying the main titles. I've heard they're so good, especially once Al Ewing and Kieran Gillen took over. I heard amazing things about those. But yeah, but yeah, it just ended up being a lot of books, and then they are now in the middle of another kind of reset with the From the Ashes era, and
Yes, yes.
people seem to be excited about those two, which I'm very happy about.
I'm excited because I heard that they're going to be, I mean, and of course, this just makes sense. They're going to eventually print on these of Hickman's run, so you can like pick up everything that's tied in and whatnot. I'm
And
still
I bet
waiting
that's
for
going to
them to
read
do,
really well.
huh?
I said I bet that's going to read really well when you can
Yes, I'm
have it
hoping
all
so.
in one
But
single
it,
and
but
having
it,
to wait for whatever
or try and go on eBay and find like this, where does this tie in and this tie in?
yeah,
It's like
exactly.
there was so much rich storytelling within that, and I was like, wow, this seems so cool. So,
And that's the thing, like that, like all the books were great. Like
mhm,
I have nothing, I have no bad things to say about the entire era of that era of X-Men. It was just a lot of books, and of course it's because they were selling so well. But
mhm.
then it's also like, all right, I was not an X-Men. I kind of fell off of X-Men because I just got really, I've been like, even now, like when I went to the comic shop, I picked up, we call them giant we called them giants. I picked up the Wade and Samney Batman and Robin year one,
Okay.
which looks really fun. I've heard really good things about that book. And then I picked up Superman 18 by Joshua Williamson and Dan Mora, and because it just seems like a fun little new status quo with Lois Lane also now having superpowers, that's fun. I'm into that. Um, and obviously Dan Moore, you can't go wrong with any Dan Moore art.
Mhm.
Just it's too good. Um, yeah. So I picked up those two, but I wanted to pick up 17 books, but unfortunately I have to be good about my budget and not spend all my money. And I have to save up money to make comics too. I can't just read comics, unfortunately. But
That's an
curse
interesting thought. That's an interesting thought for an indie creator. Yeah, that didn't even register with me. Thank you for sharing that. That's funny. The irony, as they say. But
yes.
now, why don't you plug everything that you want to plug, like Cameraman, any other projects that you have that you can mention that aren't, like big secrets at the moment?
Sure, I'd love to. So, as I mentioned, cameraman number one has was successfully funded on Kickstarter. So the print copies we're hopefully going to receive the print copies from the printer, probably if not later this week, next week, and then we're going to be shipping them out to everyone across the world that backed it. Thank you all for backing that. Excuse me. And then we are currently nose to the grind. Is that the term? I or what is that?
Rhinestone, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, nose to the yeah. Um, with issues 2 and 3, because we kind of want to make sure that we're like really being sequential with the story. We want it to be, but we also want to pack a lot in. So the first issue is about 48 pages. The second issue is going to be 48 pages. The third issue is going to be 48 pages. Like we really want to make this book like feel and read like a 2000s cartoon. And I think we're gonna do it because it's a lot of story to get in, but I also think like if we're gonna tell a story, we want to do it. We want to make it worthwhile for our readers. We want to give them a lot to munch on because it's going to take a while to make each one, but we're excited about it. And let's see. So there's that. I've got um, I'm working on, as I mentioned, the anthology. It's for a charity. I don't know how much beyond all of the stuff I told you I can share, um, but I'm very excited about it. I just got introduced to possibly my artist for it, and it's an awesome name. I'm a huge fan of theirs, so I'm very excited about it. Um, and then what else? There is I'm working on pitches. I'm in that kind of phase right now of my career with comics where I'm just trying to get some stuff out there, and I'm really excited about it. I've got a story. I sent you a copy
Yes.
of Monolith, and so I'm working on a like larger version of Monolith, and it's going to be like a whole series. It's going to be a very different story than what you read, but it's gonna be if anyone has I to plug it, I have different I have Blue Sky, I have Twitter, I have Instagram, all at the at symbol ALEAMS, and you can follow any of my socials. And I have in there in my bio, I have a link tree that has all the comics for free. I like to make as much as I can for free. I like to share it with the world. Um, Radiant Black number 22, you can still pick up in stores. You can also pick up the fourth volume, 2-in-1, I believe is the name of that trade. And the very last page of the trade has my comic in there, which is an awesome honor. And they just got nominated for a Harvey Award at New York Comic Con, which was an awesome, awesome thing. I was so excited for the whole team.
Sure.
And what else? I'm trying to think of anything else I have to plug, but I think that's about it in terms of stuff I'm working on. I have a lot of other stuff that's like in the very, very early stages, probably too early to talk about, but just trying to get my stuff out there. I have you know, lots of ideas, and I'm excited to grow in my career, and hopefully connect with people and share just great stories, hopefully.
Well, it sounds like you have a good wit about you. And just spending the past hour with you, you're such a warm, gentle soul. So I will be rooting for you.
Thank you.
And I'm grateful that you made time to come on and to chat with me and put up with the my interruptions. I apologize, but thank you very much. You're a sweet guy, and you're a warm soul. So thank you for making this an enjoyable hour. Thank you.
Thank you. You were delightful to chat with, and I'm honored that you invited me to be on your show. Thank you.
Well, thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. And again, I wish you nothing but the best. If there's anything that you want to come back on and plug, you have an open invitation. So feel free to DM me. But yeah, I'll have this up probably in the next week or so, and I'll shoot you the link.
Great. I look forward to. Well, I won't watch it because I don't like hearing my voice, but I will happily share it and get everyone else to watch it.
All right, or you can take your phone, and just turn it face down and listen. So
sure, I want to give you the views still. I just don't want to.
Yes, no, I got you.
Hear my voice.
I got you.
That's true. That's true.
So thank you very much, man, and I do wish you all the best. And I'm going to sign off.
All right, you have a good night.
You too, my friend. Be well.